Hi, I'm Bret. I'm here with Kayla, and we are bringing you Fenceline Conversations. The name of the podcast kind of came from, if you've ever watched Home Improvement, where Wilson and Tim went to their backyard fence, and Wilson dispensed a bunch of wisdom. Neither one of us are very wise, but the people that we talk to really are. Today's guest is no exception. We're talking to a guy that is really a steward and a student of the soil, of the land. And he has some really interesting parts along his journey, stories to tell. Do you have anything to take away from the podcast today?
I do think that's the main thing I took away also, and I loved this episode, but also I was shocked at the end of a big part of his life that he wasn't even going to share. That was a little bit of a surprise, so I hope everyone will stick around for that too.
Yeah, same with me. I'm like, hey, aren't you even going to say that? So, all right, let's get into today's episode. I'm here with, and you'll have to help me with your last name because I've had it wrong the whole time. Matthew Menke.
Yeah.
From what part of Texas?
Hempstead, Texas.
And I met you down here at a Martin Bach clinic.
Yes, sir.
Through Deetra, probably 5 years ago.
At least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talked about cattle, and I think I was already doing rotational grazing.
Yes.
And you were talking to me about how we moved and
I had heard you on a podcast.
okay, maybe Clay's. Yeah. Working cows.
Yep.
That's right. I forgot about that.
That was all just completely coincidental.
Yeah.
Because that 5-6 years ago, it's been a little bit longer now. Yeah, that would have been 2020.
Probably.
Yeah, I kind of started thinking about doing things different about 2017, 18. And then about 2020 when I was really starting to act on it and really kind of upset the apple cart.
Yeah.
It was about that time.
So I was down here at the clinic, and you came over, and I remember sitting on one of those bridges that you try to get your horses to go across, and talking for about 2 hours about how we move cattle and all that kind of stuff. So tell me a little bit about your journey. I know that you did some custom grazing for a while, that you had some of your own cattle, had a hay business and that, and some of that has transformed or reformed, maybe is a better word for that. So kind of share a little bit of your story about where you come from and where you're going.
Sure, and I will take this opportunity to blame or give credit to Martin for really causing me to question a lot of things. Starting even a couple of years, maybe 3 before we met, we had been coming to the clinic or been providing some cattle for the clinic and coming and participating. And I remember the first year, stockmanship part of it, and with my best friend and kind of cattle partner, for 20, 30 years being out here and just getting yelled at and us trying to be respectful, but doing what we thought was proper stockmanship and low stress cattle handling. And Martin was just chastising us up one side of the fence and down the other, and I got kind of aggravated at it. But we listened, we participated, and eventually we tried to put some of those things into use and use those tactics and those different approaches. And the more we tried, the better things worked.
Yeah.
And it was going through that made me say, if we could be wrong about stockmanship, we could be wrong about anything.
That's a good point.
And so it just made me start questioning everything.
I was the same way. Everybody was mad at my house when we got ready to work cattle. That was the thing, everybody had to be mad and griping at each other about, hey, well, you were in the wrong spot. Well, none of us knew what the heck we were doing.
Well, we didn't have that. I didn't have that experience. Man, cattle working for us was a joy. It was always a pleasure. Did we have our way of doing it? Absolutely, but we loved it. And again, we thought that we were doing things properly with low stress. And I just remember Stephen and I doing what we had always done, and Martin looking at us and saying, "You're doing the exact opposite of what you should be doing." And it blew me away.
Yeah, and he has no qualms about telling that over and over again.
I'm thankful for him telling us.
Yeah.
We're not perfect practitioners by any means, but I do more today with fewer people
Yeah.
than I ever have. And we do so much by ourselves now.
Yep.
Because I would have never even attempted certain things. I would have said, well, I need 5 riders for this.
Yeah.
And now we do it with 2, and sometimes I can do it by myself.
Yeah. And on our deal, I had never used horses in cattle. Our horses
Okay.
were just an ornament that was a pleasure. If we had time, we go out and have fun. If we're in work cattle, you're on 4x4s or,
Yeah.
4-wheelers or on foot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And everybody hated that.
Well, I've also found, because we use basically all 3,
Yeah.
I've found that the principles of good stockmanship work whether you're on a horse, whether you're on a side-by-side or a 4-wheeler, or you're on foot. Those are different practices, but the principles are universal and they work.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And the horse is probably a little easier to maneuver.
It is.
Get a quick turn
I
on it.
will say the horse probably all around is the best way to do it. It's
Yeah.
the best of every world. You
Yeah.
can make, on foot, I would say you can make the most fine adjustment, but you can't always make it, and you can't cover ground fast enough.
Yeah.
And the 4-wheeler, of course, would be the exact opposite. You can cover ground,
Yeah.
but you can't make fine-tuned
Maneuvers. Yeah.
moves.
Yeah.
And the horse, you can do
Yeah.
both. And you can do both at the same time if you need
And
to.
at the end of the day, on the horse, you're not wore plumb out from 9 million steps back and
Absolutely.
forth. Had you not been doing rotational grazing before that?
No. So about that time we met, that's why I was asking you and probably grilling you about your experiences. Growing up in a very traditional, century plus, multi-generation family business, and always been set stock, and just basically our MO was be conservative, stock lightly, and try to be as low input as we can, and as low labor. Just absolutely as low labor. Keep those costs down.
Trying to be profitable.
Yeah. Well, and I was observing and learning that our resource, our number one resource, which is our forage base, was declining in productivity. Even in my lifetime, I could see, I'm 50 years old now, and I've been paying attention since I was 5. All right, so you could say at the time, let's back up. So let's say I've been paying attention for 40 years, and I could see the productivity of our pastures and the productivity of our forage going down.
Sure.
All the while, us and myself especially, being college educated with an animal science degree, I was a input salesman. I had a business for a time in feed and fertilizer and a ag service business. So I was very knowledgeable and adept at fertilizers and herbicides and feed and supplements and any and everything that we do in animal agriculture. I was the go-to person in the county, or certainly one of them, about how to do that, because I sold the products and delivered the service.
Yeah.
And I'm going, how is it that we're doing it by the book? We're doing what the universities are telling us to do, and we're not making any headway, and we are not getting more profitable, and the margins are getting thinner and thinner. And I don't like working for a loss.
Yeah.
I don't really like working this hard for a break even. I want this to succeed, and I want to do better by my land. I view myself, and we as a family view ourselves as stewards of the land. We're not owners. The master is the owner. We're the stewards. We're the servants. We're supposed to be serving the soil and serving the animals and serving the plants. And I didn't think we were doing a very good job, or I certainly was learning that there were other people that were doing a better job. And I wanted to learn about that.
And rotational grazing leads into that.
That was just, at the time, I thought that was all there really was to it.
Yeah.
Oh, you just move cows and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
But that is one real important tool and one important aspect of it. And that was just the beginning. That's where we dove off. We jumped off the diving board about that time that we met.
So about how many cattle were you running in? Do you?
Right now, give or take, we're going to have about 1,000 animal units, and I'm just going to say a used animal unit.
Sure.
And
Sure.
then we will have during certain times of the year, we'll have heifers and or steer yearlings, so we could swell up to 14 or 1,500 animal units at certain times of the year, and then you never know, we might dwindle down to 800 or 900 depending on.
So it's a big operation anyway.
It's reasonable size, yeah. It's I say it's at a big enough scale to where it changes the way you do things sometimes.
Sure, has to.
And that was one other thing we learned, because I will say, growing up, we were a 300 cow herd, and they were set stock. So biggest herd we had might have been 75 head.
Yeah.
And then we had had one bull herd here, a 2 bull herd. Kind of look at them like, how many bull herd you got?
Yeah.
Our biggest was a 3 bull herd.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I tried to pen 250, 300 cows in one bunch, and then I found out how much my stockmanship game needed to be stepped up.
Yeah.
And that was still under set stock, kind of conventional mindset. Then to go beyond that and go to 400, 500, 600. Now I've had, my biggest mob I've ever had now has been a little over 700 head.
Yeah.
And it's different.
Yeah.
It's doable, and it can all be done. You just have to have a different mindset, and you have to develop some different skills.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of which I did not have at the time.
Are you leasing land, or is that all owned land?
Officially, I lease about 2/3 of my land. It is from other family members.
Gotcha.
I do lease a little bit of land from outside the family, but I keep I own some acres, but we keep our land business and our operating business separately. So my farm leases some acreage personally from me, and then also from the other family members, my mother, father. I have 2 sisters. And
have you been to Ranching for Profit?
I have.
Okay.
I went in it was December of 21. No, December of 22. I'm really good friends and business partners with John Locke,
Okay.
who is a Ranching for Profit instructor.
Yeah.
He
So-
and I are really close.
So he's, let's see, Dallas Mount's running it now, right?
Yes.
Dave Pratt had it, and
Yes.
and kind of handed the reins to Dallas,
Correct.
but John's an instructor.
Yes, he's been
Yeah.
an instructor for several
Yeah.
years. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you were talking about sounded like some of their.
Yeah, and we were doing that before, but it's definitely, it's a sound business principle. You have got to pay market rent whether you own the land or not, and you need to pay opportunity interest whether you have the cash or not,
Yeah.
and you got to pay yourself. Those are the 3 keys. You got to do all 3 of those things.
Yeah. And it changes the way you look at things.
It certainly does.
So you went from there. You went to did your rotational grazing, and then you did some custom grazing for a while. Is that right? Is that
Yes.
kind of the progression of things?
Yeah, we did that partially because we were increasing the land base. Well, it wasn't. It was a little bit of that, but it was as much of doing when we increased our grazing practices and got better and got our infrastructure, water and fences. We had more capacity, and my business side of my brain was saying, "Okay, Matthew, it's great to own cows, but that is going to take some more capital." And we could borrow a little money and we still be more than right side up. But what about even just from a diversity standpoint? Let's own some cattle and then let's custom graze some, give us more consistent cash flow. I won't have to borrow this chunk of money to increase the herd. It's really from a business diversity standpoint, and we kind of needed to expand because we were getting more capacity because of our grazing practice. It was kind of a win-win, or at least that's the way I had looked at it and the way I wanted it to design it that way.
And it sounds like you used it for a stepping stone. I mean,
Yes.
you needed to get to a certain point.
Yeah.
And that allowed you some cash flow to be able to get to
Yes.
that point.
Absolutely.
Because at that time you had a hay business as well. where
We
you were
did, and we
producing.
continued to operate that. We were in the horse quality square bale business. Started that in 2000, I guess about 2010. And that was really our bread and butter. That was actually our number one net profit enterprise and number one driver as far as cash flow and net profit. And we were able to do some experimentation with our cow herd because we had that as kind of a base and good, steady, profitable income, we could afford to experiment a little bit with these new types of grazing. It helped us cash flow those infrastructure improvements that we were making.
Sure. Yeah.
To get
that's not cheap.
To get rotational and adaptive grazing started.
Yeah, because you're talking miles and miles of water line.
We did.
Yeah.
We
and tanks.
In 2 years we put in a little over 5 miles.
Yeah.
And of water, and I've completely forgotten how many miles of fence.
That's labor intensive and it's time consuming
Yeah.
and it's costly.
Yes, it was all of those
I've
things.
done all that,
Yeah,
so I know what
sure.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
If you can swing it, it really helps things out because
Absolutely.
you've got that water where that cow herd needs it without having to walk back over the grass that they've already used or the new grass that they're getting ready to use. That cuts the amount of cow trails down, which is compaction, and there's just a lot of benefits to it.
We also learned something about that, and it's a little counterintuitive to what a lot of people think of when they think about breaking up into smaller pastures and moving cattle, or just adding that water. Most people are saying, well, we're doing this because we want to give some areas more rest. More rest. Rest is key, right? Well, believe it or not, if you don't have water distributed very well on the landscape, and you're understocked, you actually get too much rest in certain areas. The areas that are remote away from water, and if it's understocked and we have good rainfall, the cattle never have to visit those areas.
Yeah.
Because there's always enough for them to eat closer to the water. And that was one of those areas I started noticing. Our remote areas, there was never any animal impact. No hoof, no manure, no cow ever walked there because they didn't have to. And those were degrading as bad or worse than the area near the water trough that gets pounded into the ground and beat out.
So degrading with weed infestation or tree sprouts and that kind of thing, or what?
All the above.
Yeah.
Because what happens is you get vegetation, it grows up and it never gets impacted. So it oxidizes. And eventually it falls down, it starts to rot, and there's nothing to ever take it, and it then kind of starts to smother, and then that happens year after year after. It's the opposite cycle of overgrazing. Overrest, or areas that never receive animal impact, will degrade. Not in the same mechanism, but I mean the net effect is degrading and lower production.
Sure.
Lower tonnage.
So go from there to you've since sold your hay business, or actually you quit producing hay.
Correct.
Talk about the reasons behind that a little bit.
The main reason for that was learning more. It's kind of like when we started with this Stockmanship stuff. We started questioning everything. Well, then I learned about rest, learned about recovery, I learned about animal impact, learned about stock density, concentrating nutrients, manure, urine, all those things, all those positive things that our animals are doing for us as we go across the landscape. But then I started learning more about what's below the ground. So not just above ground vegetation, but we're looking at our soil. And then we're looking at our plant roots. And then we're looking even deeper than that. We're looking at our microbial communities, how all of those are working together, and in an effective system, there's a symbiosis going on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the hay business, especially in the way I was doing, it was highly dependent on synthetic fertilizers and herbicides.
Yeah.
And we were not trying to get away, on the cheap. I looked at it this way. We own the land, or the land is stable. I'm not here to just put out the minimum amount of fertilizer and see how much biomass I could take off and sell it for a profit. I wanted to be in business for not just 20 years. I want to be in business and pass it on. And I'm like, I'm not going to shortchange my soil. I'm going to test my soil. I'm going to put what the plant needs, and I'm not going to shortchange it. And our inputs per acre blew my competitors' minds. They couldn't believe how much money I spent per acre on inputs. Mm-hmm. But when you do that and you have favorable weather conditions, you produce a lot of tonnage. And we made a lot of hay, and we were very productive above ground. And we removed a lot. Removed every nutrient we ever put in, and then some.
Yep. You're cutting all that off, putting in a hay bale and selling
and
it
we
to
were
somebody.
exporting it to
Yeah.
our customers.
Yeah.
None of it ever went
Yeah.
back on the land.
Yeah.
So as poor of a manager or as a steward as we had been in the pasture,
Yeah.
because not knowing, doing what we thought was best, and our pasture production slowly going down over decades and decades. When I say that, I'm talking about, like I said 40 years. But I bet you if my grandfather would be here today, I could take him to a place and he could look at it and he would say, oh my gosh, when I was a teenager, this piece of property used to do X and now it only does Y. But as bad as that was over in the pasture, all we were doing that was speeding that up in the hay and learning at what cost were we providing that really good net income and that good diverse cash flow and all those things I was talking about that were positive earlier. What overall cost is that really costing us? And our soil was suffering. The roots of our plants were suffering, and my stands were starting to suffer. I couldn't keep my monoculture that I needed to sell without more and more chemicals, more and more synthetic fertilizers in order to keep up. And simultaneously, I was just really convicted about stopping all that. And I'm like, I can't ride the fence. I'm either going to have to just throw all that stuff out the window and just be full on conventional and take the money, or I'm going to have to quit and figure out a way to start reversing this cycle of degradation. And one thing that really, really hit me home was we were working on about 400 acres, give or take. Some of that, and we built that, started it from 35 acres. Over a 10, 15 year period, grew from 35 acres of square bales into 400 plus. So I started counting it up, and I looked at our field that had been in production the longest, and the one that we had been manipulating with our human. What am I trying to say? We were trying to impose our human will on these 35 acres. They were the poorest, lowest producing, and most degraded acres we had. And the pasture where our best production was, where our stand was pure, our roots were nice, the soil was still nice and soft and had the least amount of weed pressure, was what we'd been working on for the shortest amount of time. And I said, man, this is just proof right here. This piece of land in another 10 years is going to be just as bad as this one if we keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
So we made the decision last fall. I sold the hay business, just transferred the customers over to some others who were buying and reselling, because I wasn't going to just produce the hay and sell it to them. I mean, the whole point was to stop.
Sure.
And we don't even make hay for our own cattle. We don't use much hay to begin with, but if we need hay, I'm going to buy it and I'm going to import it in and not export it out.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the most expensive parts of the cattle business in our area anyway, is trying to hay through the winter.
Yes.
And if you can grow forage and keep it in front of it and teach those cattle to graze, you'll...
And we feed that hay on our worst areas, even in our hay fields, where they're the most degraded. We're going to put those nutrients, those natural nutrients, not the synthetic or the chemical nutrients, but we're going to put those natural nutrients back and let them cycle through the animal, go back in as manure and urine, and then also use our hoof action and impact.
We got some Google Earth photos without even really realizing it. They go over, I don't know how often, and recapture another photo.
Okay, yeah.
From satellite. And we had done some bale grazing. And so the first satellite photo, you see all the bells out there ready, and then the next one you can see it was in the middle of feeding, like half of them were fed, and we're moving an electric string.
Oh, wow, so they were that close together. The satellite photos were that close together.
Yeah. And then the next one was like almost a year later, and you can just see green rings of grass where they had spread that out and went about, I don't know, it's a 6 foot round bale sitting on its end, and they probably spread it out 20, 25 feet and then tromped in. They waste a lot. If you want to say waste, they waste a lot of it, but They trump that in, and man, now the clover and stuff that's in there is just unbelievable.
It is, and you know, we do a lot of bale unrolling. The best is somewhere in the middle. You know, you unroll, they might eat a little bit more, and you don't get quite as good biological activity, but they don't waste as much.
Yeah.
You know, you do a true bale graze, they probably waste a little more, and your impact area is a little smaller, but it may last a little longer. And I think you need to do, you know, just mix it up, do a little bit of everything, and, you know, move that biology around. And the main thing is too, once you get the biology working, don't kill it.
Yeah.
You know, leave it alone and let it expand and proliferate on its own.
So are you deworming?
That's a big big can of worms. When I started, and I would say this is one of my big mistakes. We made tons of them. I'm an all or nothing kind of guy, Bret. If I think I'm wrong and I'm convinced of it, well, then I'm going to turn around 180 degrees and go the other way. You know, if I'm convinced that something is right, you're not going to stop me, you know, from doing it. I'm working on that as a personality flaw. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I learn about all these people that are good practitioners and how they don't deworm and they don't use vaccinations and they don't use any of these quote unquote crutches or inputs, I go, well, I don't need to do it anyway. I'm not going to do it either. So we didn't deworm anything. We had a lot of parasite problems.
Did they?
I'm going to fast forward. I was looking at people that had been doing this for 20, 10, 5, maybe even just 4 or 5 years. And that's what they're doing now. And whether I didn't hear them or they didn't say it, doesn't matter. My brain goes, well, I can immediately make a change and start acting like someone that's been doing this for a decade. And I was an amateur, and I was learning from an expert. So there is a process, and I don't believe that in most situations you can just go cold turkey.
Same.
It is a journey, not a destination.
Yep.
And so to answer your question now, if I bring a new naive animal into the system that I bought, they get everything but the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
Because I have no idea about their history, their background, and I've already paid the tuition of liver flukes, terrible parasite loads that you know, the cattle come here with it.
Yep.
And then, you know, you end up with a lot of mortalities and a lot of underperformance and a lot of open cows, and you know, the list goes on, and then you trace it back. You know, you can't afford to make those mistakes very long.
Sure.
So they get everything but the kitchen sink, vaccinations, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
My animals that have been here and been in the system and been proving themselves, we slowly wean them off 1, 2, or 3 kind of products at a time. Our goal is to deworm or really defluke. That's ultimately our biggest concern now. I think we're overcoming the actual roundworm or just your typical internal parasites with our movements and with adapted genetics.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we do graze a lot of areas, and we can't control the weather, which means we can't control the excessive rainfall, which means we can't control the mud.
Yep.
And even being adaptive and trying to avoid muddy areas, sometimes you get caught. And so we end up grazing our cattle in areas where they're going to be exposed to mud snails. And someday I hope to have my soil in better condition, and I hope to have an entire herd of cows that is completely resistant to that. But until that day comes, we defluke them once a year.
Yeah.
But nothing like our conventional neighbors do, multiple products, multiple times a year. No, I try to do as little as possible, but without shortchanging the cow. And you got to give the cow a fighting chance, especially when you brought her in from unknown management, and she's got to get adapted to your environment, your management style, and you can't change too many things at one time, and I'm guilty of that.
Yep. Yep, we tried that too, and we tried cold turkey, and it was a train wreck for a little while.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about, in case someone doesn't really know, on deworming that's not so bad of a deal for the animal. I'm not opposed to that at all, but it's when that manure hits the ground.
Oh yeah.
That it's laying there, and it may be sterile, so it's not. It may be killing microorganisms that's underneath that manure pile, where you would normally have activity that's actually taking that manure down into the ground.
Absolutely.
And you don't have any of that if it's got so much dewormer in it that it
That's
kills
exactly
everything.
right. And we found there are some dewormers that are a little softer on biology than others. And there's even something as simple as using short acting versus a long acting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we have some sacrifice paddocks. So I'll employ tactics such as we get a new group of cattle in. Again, we don't know the history. We're going to use these short-term but broad spectrum products, and then we're going to be wire training them anyway. So they're going to kind of go on a little sacrifice area, and all of that's going to kind of flush out of the system before we take them and put them in one of our grazing units where we're really trying to keep that clean of pesticides, clean of all those chemicals.
Yeah.
And I will say we've got more dung beetle activity than we've ever had. I remember the first dung beetle I ever saw 5 or 6 years ago and going, oh wow, that's what one is.
Yeah.
And then going around for the next 2-3 years going, well, how come I only see 1 or 2 in the whole pasture?
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of times 50 to 75% of the patties have dung beetle activity.
Yeah.
And that to me is a win.
And they're taking that cow patty or that manure pile, and they're
cycling
they're
it.
taking it
Yeah,
right
they
down.
are your hardest worker.
Yeah, boring it right
The
into the ground.
smaller the organism, the more work he's doing for you.
Yeah.
That little dung beetle's only that big, and he's working hard for you. And those little bitty bacteria and protozoa and fungi,
Yeah.
you can't even see them, and they're doing as much or more work than everybody else put together.
Yeah, absolutely. Shifting gears a little bit, you play fiddle,
I do.
and you've had some pretty cool experiences the last couple of years. You want to?
I have had blessed experiences beyond a couple of years. I mean, the last 2, yes, but I mean, I have really had a wonderful experience with music, and God's blessed me with opportunities to be able to always be at home. I have always had a day job. I have never been 100% professional musician and only gotten my income from that, but I have basically been able to have all the great experiences as a full-time professional musician, but still I get to eat.
Yeah.
I have a pickup that cranks every morning when I get up, and I don't have to sleep on my couch or sleep.
Yeah.
I've been able to have a life.
Yeah.
It's been great.
I mean, I just saw y'all sitting around doing a little jam session at his place. So, yeah, just talk about that a little bit.
So I did the majority of my traveling and other music endeavors with a wonderful mentor and a good friend named Gary P. Nunn. He's a founding member of Texas country music and still plays and tours. I was his band leader for a few years and toured with him for 4 years. One of my greatest friends in the music business and just a kind of a road compadre and roommate in that band was Russ Patterson. He was a drummer. Russ ended up moving on and working for Coulter and has for now, I guess, 3 or 4 years. I subsequently kind of got off the road in 2021 and was really not playing very much at all. And Russ called me one day and he says, "Hey man, if you get a phone call with a Canadian area code, answer it." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, Coulter said that he wants to maybe do a little something different on Phil on this new record, and he asked me who I should get." And I gave him your name, and I said, "Why'd you do that?" He said, "Oh, come on, man, it's going to be great. Just trust me, it's going to be great." I said, "Okay." Well, anyway, he called me, and it was an honor to be asked. And first thing I did was say, "Hey, I need to know what kind of fiddle you want, because the last thing I want you to do is, fly me to Nashville, go through all this trouble, and me not to be able to do what you want. What's the theme of the record?" And he gave me a quick little lowdown, and he sent me a song, and he said, "I want the fiddle to sound like this," and I listened to it. I said, "I can do that." Anyway, they flew me to Nashville, put me up in a hotel, and got to go to the very big time storied RCA Studio A, where everybody from Frank Sinatra to Waylon Jennings to Chet Atkins. I mean, you name it, of country and pop and all kinds of big acts have been in that room, standing on that, in that space.
Yeah.
And stood at those microphones and made some historic recordings And man, I just got to go in there, do my little part, add some fiddle to 4 tracks, and then, you know, lo and behold, they released it, and that's just been a absolute thrill. And in the process, got to know Coulter, his dad, got to know a man named Dan Black. That's Coulter's now engaged to his daughter, his quote unquote future father-in-law. He's a cattle producer from Saskatchewan. We hit it off. He was there at the recording session, and Jan and I spent our 25th wedding anniversary up in Canada with Dan and his wife Glenise, and Coulter and his family are just, you know, kind of all part of that deal. So we went out to his place. They came over, and you know, we become friends over the deal, and it's been a real blessing.
Yeah, you were telling me this really hit me. It's funny, but I thought it was a cool thing. You were telling me that when you talked to Coulter, he was saying, "Well, now we can't do it in 2 weeks or whatever because I'm pulling yearlings or shipping yearlings or something." And you were thinking, "This is my kind of guy."
Well, and I said the same thing. That's what was so funny. He asked me. He said, "What's the third week of October look like?" And I said, "Man, that's great." I said, "I got a bunch of calves I got to ship for my cousin, and we'll be all shipped out by then." And he goes, "Me too."
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great.
That's really cool. Where you go from here? You got anything on the? I know you've done a bunch of changes.
Yeah. We're just gonna wake up tomorrow, and we're gonna look at our herds, and we're gonna assess what happened over the weekend, and we're gonna figure out what kind of moves we need to make. And we're just finishing up calving season. We've got probably 10-15 days left, and we should be calved out. This is the most successful calving season that we have had since we've been doing this. We learned so much. Oh my gosh, I'm just embarrassed to tell you how many ways we fell on our face those first few years. But it is really encouraging to make some even more changes. You know,
Sure.
Even within the new framework, we're still learning, adapting, and
Well, you say it's embarrassing, but I will throw out there that if someone contacts you and asks you that, you're the kind of guy that'll tell them every mistake you've made so that they can avoid that. And
I would.
And people have done that for us, and that's, you know, you're kind of stepping into more of a mentor role there because you've been there and done that, and you're not afraid to share your mistakes. I think that's really important.
Well, maybe, but I still need mentors.
For sure, we all do.
I still need people that will help me with this stuff that we still haven't figured out
yet. We're just going to be learning. I mean, you're going to be a lifelong learner in this deal from what I understand.
Well,
anyway.
I think we all should be.
Yeah.
We should never feel like we ever get to where we know it all.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool, Matthew. I appreciate you taking time to talk to me. I know you come over here.
You're welcome.
You provide a cattle for us, and we appreciate that too. We get to play around with cattle down there for a week and try to improve our horsemanship while Martin's yelling at us. And,
yeah.
You know, but I really appreciate you talking to me. Catch you down the road.
All right, sounds good.
All right, thanks, brother.
Yeah, you bet.
Man, that was pretty good and kind of an interesting deal right there at the end that, you know, both of us talked about beforehand. You know, playing for Coulter, I would think would be, if I were doing something like that, that would be a huge part of my, you know, something I wanted to say.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can tell this other, you know, he's just so passionate about the land and the soil and all those things. And I think maybe you get started with a conversation and he thinks this is what we're talking about. But yeah, number one, I didn't know he was a musician of any kind. I think that sometimes whenever we see these people playing on these big stages and maybe getting lots of views on the internet, we don't realize that a lot of the people in the band have other jobs and, you know, are probably just like people just down the road from us. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, just like the lead-in music for this, my nephew did.
Yeah.
You know, and he plays in a band, and you know, I mean, he's a kid from Stillwater, Oklahoma.
I love
it. And they go all over the country.
Musicians just mesmerize me because I am not musical at all.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think I'm all the time just so impressed.
Yeah, I play the radio.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I like that. That's me too.
But, you know, Matthew, talking about the soil, caring for the soil, and the difference from what his granddad would have saw and what he's seeing, you know, we've noticed that on our ranch. We went from set stock to rotational grazing in 2019 or 2020, And the podcast that he was referring to seeing me on with, or hearing me on, was Clay Conry's Working Cows. Clay said, "You ripped the Band-Aid off." I mean, we really did. I mean, we went all in all at once, and it was almost a disaster. I'll just tell you that right up front. It's just, and Massey was saying, we try to do too many things at once, and the cattle weren't used to it, and the people that helped weren't used to it, and the infrastructure wasn't there. And it's just
then it affects your income. I think I was listening to that and I thought, I'm so glad he mentioned that and you guys had that conversation, because I think it gives people the permission to take it one step at a time.
Sure.
And maybe be more receptive, because it's not as overwhelming to get started with, because there's so much of that I think inherently makes sense to us. But we're so bought in and we're so far on one way. Gosh.
Yeah.
It's a big decision to even start to make the pivot, let alone feel like you have to make it all at one time.
Sure. And you start out and you study each aspect of that. And for me, I felt like that if I was going to do it, I needed to do it all at once. But what it winds up being akin to is multitasking. Mm-hmm. I can't multitask. I one thing at a time. And really, I think most people that say that they can, they're not very good at either one of them, Yeah. And this is trying to do maybe 6 or 8 or 10 and get so many animals to learn your new system at the same time.
Well, in the infrastructure, I mean...
Water, big thing.
You gotta... That all takes time and resources and all those things, and a big investment, so you have to be pretty bought in to start doing that. But also, again, a lot of people are going to say, we can't do that because we can't afford to put in that infrastructure right away.
Sure.
Or I work a town job, I can't move water every day either, I don't have the time. So I think that mentioning that was super helpful.
We ran water lines and put stock tanks out and pump ponds and fence ponds. We did all kinds of things. I had a little bit of an advantage because we used to install lawn sprinkler systems, so I knew all about that, and I had resources working by wholesale, and we used the same ingenuity really for the lawn sprinkler systems. But we were at that point, we were trying not to damage someone's lawn, but running water line on the farm, it just makes it so you don't have to dig a ditch and then cover it up. It lays at the same time that you pull it. And you just drive a tractor down through there and reel it off. It's a lot easier.
Yeah, I bet. It sounds like it.
What else stood out to you?
A couple other things did, and there was a funny in there too, but whenever he said, we're doing it by the book, and this was a longer quote, we're doing it by the book, and then the end of it, he said, and the margins are getting thinner and thinner. And I think so many people are living that right now, more than ever. And we are even in a place where cattle prices have been the highest that they've been in probably maybe my whole lifetime, at least my adult life. And the banknotes and these different things are a little bit easier to do, but still the margins are not good enough. And like he said, this is a lot of work to do to break even, let alone end up in the red. And so I know that there's, we have our family farm because there's people who have operated in the red in the past. And I'm sure that's something, we might have to do in the future. But at the end of the day, it's not sustainable.
Sure.
And so I think whenever he said, if we could be wrong about stockmanship, we could be wrong about anything. And I really just appreciate people who are learners, who are open-minded. And I have found that is not always the norm in this industry. And I think that comes from that independence and that self-sufficiency that we all have had to subscribe to survive.
Sure.
So I understand. I'm empathetic to how we got here. But seeing somebody like this in the industry and then you guys giving it a little bit of a voice here is really cool.
Yeah, he actually got me started in custom grazing. because I had talked to him a year. Each time I go to Houston every year, sometimes twice a year, and hang out with those people that have become my friends. Dieter was there, and Matthew lives there, and Matthew actually he's a real estate agent for her, part time.
Okay.
So, but he had talked to me about custom grazing cattle, and I was like, well, how do you do that? And what's your contract look like? And they just share everything that they have, and how he does his charges and what he wants to tell his customers, and that's been a really good deal for me and my neighbor. I mean, it's been something that we've been able to kind of bond over, and because he's not here all the time, and I can help him out by watching his cattle, and he doesn't have to worry about if the fence is down or something like that.
One thing that if I was sitting there and could have asked him, was he mentioned that they're not even making hay now for their own herd, and that if they're feeding hay, which they're feeding minimal hay, they're bringing it in. And maybe he kind of alluded to it, but I'm wondering what kind of practices is he wanting people to have before he buys their hay?
Yeah, that's a good question.
How important is that to him whenever he's in, bringing in outside hay, because then he's putting it on that ground.
Sure.
And I know he talked about putting it on, like the least
sacrifice ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's still doing, I think he said he's still doing some weed control where he has to. And so about the only thing you would bring in with that would be weeds or trash. I mean, if they brought trash in, but weeds in the most part. And if he needed to, he could do weed control there. I think the benefits really outweigh the risk, because like he's saying, they're rolling out, those cattle are trampling in, they're probably only eating half of it.
Yeah.
And we do that as well. And it looks really wasteful until you go, like I said, get a satellite view a year later and you see a green swath and you're like, what? Oh, I rolled out a bale of hay when the snow was on, the cattle bedded in that.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of extra work. It takes a lot of extra labor. I guess I should say that. Not everything costs money as far as inputs except labor. And I do most of the labor here myself. But we drag that. If we have too much buildup there, we drag that. So that ring, that hay ring, if we do feed in a ring, it doesn't sit in the same place very long. And then if there is too much hay built up that it's not going to actually decompose during that spring and summer, we'll drag that with an old spring tooth and just pull it out and get it out. And you got to hook on the spring tooth, you got to put diesel on the tractor, you may spend a couple hours, but man, it's so worth it at the end of the summer to see the difference, because you have no weed rings or dead spots or whatever that is. Being a good steward, I think that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
We appreciate you listening. We'll catch you on the fence line.
Sounds good.